somebody's getting rewarded as a new customer, and hold on a minute, I've been with you for 10 years and you're rewarding these new customers here and you're advertising the fact. What an insult. In terms of lifetime value, I think if we can start the journey towards personalisation, where we're talking true one-to-one engagement, if you're able to give the value that the customer perceives, lock them into that value and say, right, I am here now, willing to serve you. I think the future of marketing really is a discipline. Any marketer or anybody who wants to become a marketer is just going to have to wake up. And what I mean by that is to just realize that the old marketing models are old marketing models. When we introduce things like metaverse, a lot of people call that virtual reality. I'm calling it new reality, because I think with personalization, with AI, we're looking at a new reality emerging where we'll see this beautiful blend of opportunities to trade globally, even off planet, quite possibly, if Elon's got anything to do with it.
Neil, welcome to the podcast.
It's great to be here. Lovely to see you.
I think a great place to start is just to share a little bit about yourself for the listeners.
Yes, well, I'm Neil Wilkins and based here in the UK. You can probably tell by the accent. Yes, English through and through, and been in marketing for, crikey, a long, long time. 3.5 decades, actually, of marketing experience now. And every time I say it, I seem to have to add another year on. So, life is moving fast. So first part of my career was very much working for big brands, both B2B and B2C. And the thread, though, really has been digital all the way through, and try to sort of drag various organizations and managers and things kicking and screaming into the brave new world of digital. More recently running my own consultancy, do a lot of teaching with Cambridge Marketing College here in the UK. Got a whole host of apprentices who I look after and mentor. So it's a whole bunch of different things, but marketing really is the key kind of theme that runs through it all.
You remember how your journey started and what attracted you to marketing in the first place?
Well, it's a bit of a funny one, really, because it was a journey that I really did not plan. I thought I was going to be in people development and HR. So when I graduated from uni in psychology, which was the degree that I did, it was all about people, fascination with people, and thought I was going to be in sort of human resources and kind of that sort of thing. That's actually where I started in recruitment. So I was actually in kind of recruitment is very much sales when you work for a consultancy. So kind of cut my teeth there, and eventually ended up being recruited by my biggest client at the time, and in a recruitment role within their people development team. And I thought, this is it. I've made it. I've actually got to where I wanted to be. I can now develop the career. And of course, recruitment freeze, everything dries up. And they say, well, we haven't actually got a job for you now, but we have got this job in this thing called marketing. I don't know whether you'd fancy that. And of course, at this stage, I have no idea what it is, but I needed to pay the mortgage. So it was time to just say yes to marketing. And literally day one, I thought, how did that happen? I have found something that is so much more me than anything I could have actually created off my own back. So I literally fell into it. And the rest is history, I guess.
So you're in your 4th decade of marketing. How has everything changed? Because that's quite a long time to be in the trenches, and so much technology and what exists now never would have existed when you started out. So what have been the main changes that you had to innovate and adapt for along the way?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, certainly early days, was pre-internet. It was quite a few years pre-internet. And in fact, there was literally one particular role I had where there was literally one computer in the office, and you had to kind of book it to be able to use it. And of course, it wasn't connected, and it was just to do the little spreadsheet thing. And we were all excited about that. But for me, I think the big thing that's kind of kept me so excited, and even now kind of feeling like I'm still starting out in marketing, is this kind of future-facing kind of angle to marketing. So that's when I said about, really kind of going with the whole digital thing as it started to emerge. So Web 1, as we might call it, internet, dawn of the internet, really, where I could see something on my computer screen and you could see it on yours. And of course, that then got me thinking, hold on a minute, we're doing all this print marketing, this advertising marketing, this product. Hold on a minute, we could start doing this actually on screens. And it kind of, it was very a quick introduction to me, really, to that whole kind of digital thing. And of course, then sort of, trying to get other people involved and motivated and excited about this whole idea. So I guess, I don't want to oversell it, but kind of almost like one of the early pioneers of digital fundamental, really. And I can remember working with some agencies at the time when I was client side and just really trying to broach this subject of, could we do this? Could we do that? And it was still kind of such early days. And yeah, I think that was probably the thing, was that I think to kind of succeed and continue succeeding in marketing, it is that really forward facing. So having seen then, social media, Web 2, as we could call it, kind of start to sort of come into play, where it wasn't about the brands, it was about the people you were serving. And so that was another trend that I saw. And again, then having to reinvent the definition of marketing to be not about us, but about you as a customer. So that was a fascinating difference. I mean, it really was. You had to do proper marketing then. And of course, now with the emergence of all these new technologies, AI, which I'm sure we're going to touch on, metaverse, and the whole sustainability and carbon footprint piece, which of course all brands now need to recognize and play with. It just keeps giving. So for me, the whole kind of idea of being a marketer is that it's all very well having, the textbooks and all the history behind you, but actually the winners, I think, in marketing the ones who are facing forward and are willing to take those risks and be those pioneers, really.
I love that concept too, because when I started out 14 odd years ago with the agency, the platforms and things that we do now didn't even exist. And I think that just shows how, say, my son Bailey is at school now, the job that he's probably going to work in hasn't been created yet, which is fascinating. One of the concepts that I love that you have, which I think will never get outdated, is personalisation in marketing. Did you want to share a little bit about personalisation concept?
Yeah, it's one of those things that I have been waiting for, well, it feels like forever for this to become a reality. I was banging the personalization drum way, way back, even before it was kind of seen as being something that would actually be practically possible to do. And, if you go back and read some of the very, very old dusty textbooks about marketing, they'll often say, almost this kind of one-to-one marketing, which of course now we know as personalization, would be the ultimate thing. But of course, that's not possible. So therefore, you kind of scale up and you talk about segmentation, you talk about demographics, you talk about personas, and kind of almost grouping like-minded customers into great big groups, and then you serve those groups. But of course now we know, again, with the assistance of the emerging technologies, that to be able to serve a customer at a one-to-one individual level is now possible. So I think it's kind of now, it's almost this perfect storm that you don't have to do it. It's not an easy thing to do, even with the technology, but I think it's the ultimate goal. I mean, it is that kind of holy grail of marketing, really, that you can have a one-to-one, genuine, authentic relationship with a customer, serve them with value, build a lifetime relationship with them. And it's all those perfect scenarios coming together in this perfect storm. And yeah, I am welcoming it.
What do you think that does for lifetime customer value and also conversion rate, focusing on that personalization? Because I think a lot of companies and businesses do the churn and burn approach, and that hurts them big picture. How do you feel like it impacts those customer lifetime value metrics?
I think it's just so fundamental. I mean, we all know various examples probably that have affected us so individually ourselves, where, somebody's getting rewarded as a new customer, and hold on a minute, I've been with you for 10 years and you're rewarding these new customers here and you're advertising the fact. What an insult. It's ridiculous how we do that. And so I totally agree with you. That's almost the ugly sort of commodity side of marketing. And, I'm not proud of being part of that industry, to be fair. So I think in terms of lifetime value, I think if we can start to, even if it is start the journey towards personalization, where we're talking true one-to-one engagement, it is a lock-in. It's an absolute lock-in, where if you're able to give the value that the customer perceives, lock them into that value and say, right, I am here now, willing to serve you, and let's talk about lifetime value. Why not? Absolutely. Because if you're doing personalized marketing, you serve them with something of value, could be a product, could be a service, might be something else, which is also an interesting concept. Is there something beyond product and service that could be traded here? And then when that thing, whatever it is, comes to the end of its natural life cycle, what comes next? Because there's almost this ultimate flow of transaction, of engagement, of value that should, if you're providing pure value to the customer, and of course you're getting value back as well, because this is for a long haul, it should last forever. There's no reason that you cannot keep this true. I've got a couple of clients clients that I'm almost, I guess you could say, kind of dabbling with this concept with, and I've kept for many, many years. My oldest client is actually now, this will be the 24th year actually
Wow.
with this client. And it's, for a whole variety of reasons, but I'm kind of just trying to serve new value every single year to them. And I've got another one that is about 7 years old. And it's not because I'm a great marketer. It is just because what I'm trying to do here is always keep them just that one step ahead of where they would otherwise be. And that seems to be something that they really value. So I continually do it, and I get the value back because obviously it's a retained client. Also, then they get the value back because then they're that one step ahead of the competition. So it kind of feels like that's the sweet spot in personalization. You've got to be doing things in that lifetime value that serve you as the marketer or as the brand, but you've always got to be that one step ahead for the customer, kind of preempting what they're going to want and then keeping it sweet.
Do you want to elaborate a little bit on that? Because I think that's really important for the listeners that want to edge over the competition. So do you want to maybe share some ways you've been able to do it for 4 decades in the marketing space and how you keep staying those 2 steps ahead of your clients and everyone else in the marketplace?
It's not easy. I would say it is actually really, really difficult to do. And I think one of the main reasons why it is so difficult to do is because you constantly and consistently have to push them beyond the comfort zone. It kind of, you could use the word risk of kind of pushing them a little bit too far. And so there's this kind of idea that to kind of be able to do this, you've always got to keep that one step ahead, not 2 steps, 3 steps, because often that becomes too risky. There isn't enough evidence to back up a recommendation that you make. It might be that then there is this feeling of like, oh, he's a little bit gung-ho, he's kind of pushing this too far. We're not comfortable with that. But I think if you can just push that one step, and of course, one step is all it takes. Because what's the old phrase that if you're with a mate or something and there's a lion or a tiger or something chasing you, you've only got to be one step ahead of your friend and you're not going to get caught. So it's kind of that same sort of adage. And I love that little quote. It's something like that anyway, because it is true. It is literally just that one step. And the thing that it needs to be matched with is evidence. You have to be able to back it up. So either to show that you've been actively listening or watching trends. So not little snapshots in time that just produce, an argument in the moment, but something that has got legs and longevity. So if you can evidence things with trends and you can then be really confident, not too overconfident, but just confident enough that the trend is robust and reliable. So, good sources, Harvard Business Review, Boston Consulting Group, Forrester, these kind of big organizations who have been doing this stuff for a long, long time. If you can use some of their more strategic kind of white papers to kind of set the scene and then take it down to a local level within the sector itself, sort of evidence some trends, evidence how directionally you think things are going, and then just literally holding the customer or the client's hand, take that one step forward outside of the comfort zone box, because that's where the competition is still going to be. So it kind of almost trains them not to just be following the competition, but kind of moving into a position of leadership, even though they might not be by scale the market leader.
More recently, what has that been for you working with clients and businesses?
So I think really for me, it has been about kind of almost being a thought leader in some of the areas that I mentioned, which are, very much about not, again, pushing too hard in the whole AI piece, but just gently and gradually introducing some of the new opportunities in there. Again, not just for content production, but for some really clear thinking around some of the chatbots and AI agents, and certainly things like automation, about putting sort of process mapping into place so that you're preparing yourself for when that comes at scale. At the moment, it's still kind of an emerging opportunity, but I think it's about kind of getting the house in order, really. So that's probably a really sort of clear example. Certainly on the sustainability thing, which here in the UK is becoming massive. Most brands now have to have some kind of statement with regard to carbon footprint and the journey that they're on to even be taken seriously in most sectors now. And so there, it's not about necessarily pushing too hard with the projects themselves, but it's about education. It's about helping people to become more aware of actually what does that mean to us as a business? How far can we take this? And then so the education piece comes in there. So I think it's this balance between thought leadership and education. I think if you can kind of be that sort of guide, advisor, as well as consultant, I think then it just lifts the confidence level for everybody. And you can then talk confidently to the customer or the client, because you've got backup. You're not just doing this on a wing and a prayer. You're actually doing it with something that feels quite tangible as evidence.
On the note of sustainability, I know that for the generations that are younger coming through, this is definitely a selling point that resonates with them and something that forms part of a lot of their values. So companies that lead with that and innovate in those areas will stand out and appeal to the future buyers. How important is purpose and values in marketing?
Absolutely critical. I think an organization, and there's again so much research to back this up, but an organization that is just in denial or kind of ignoring it, or just doesn't really feel that, oh, well, that doesn't apply to our industry as much as it might do to, I don't know, FMCG or retail or anything like that, is not going to be around in business at all. They just will not be in the game. So I think it is absolutely critical. And one of the things that a lot of people often say then is, yeah, but where do you start? And then the general answer is you just start. You just take that first step. You make a go of things. The more you can do things in public as well tends to be the most successful approach. So any organization that waits until they're 100% ready has missed the point of what this journey is. Again, all the research is pointing to things like net zero isn't a destination, it's a journey. Because if you wait until you get there, you've missed that accumulation of, say, carbon footprint that you've got in all that time. And you've missed that moment because you've already done the damage by the time you get to net zero. So it is a case of literally making a start, recognizing that you're not perfect, and that actually, even to get to net zero is not perfection. We need to be positive. So it needs to be going beyond that to kind of, claw back some of the damage that we've done. So one of the things I think that is really, really clear is really kind of almost agreeing as an organization what your boundaries are for what you can share. So as long as obviously it's not too commercially sensitive, pretty much anything else goes. And I think there's a lot of organizations now in many sectors who are being really rewarded for the fact they're being very open, very transparent, probably way more than you'd expect from them as a brand. And customers are loving it. They're saying, okay, we respect that. We know you're not perfect, but we can see that you've got good intentions. So there's this kind of almost inspirational feeling that comes out of that as organizations release just those little steps that they're taking. And people love it because they think, yeah, you're being really honest. You're not waiting until you're perfect. You're not over-promising. You're not greenwashing, which is the worst thing when you're trying to cover things up. You're actually just telling us how it is, and we can make a judgment then. We might not think that's good enough, and so we might go to the competition, but you're still in the game. That's the key. If you're not doing this, you're not even in the game, and you might not realize it. So the key thing is to just start.
Yeah, I love that. And with all these considerations now that also everyone's exposed, everyone's got access to a media platform of their own so they can have their voice and share their opinion, which is why I think you could sweep some of that under the rug earlier. But now if someone has a bad experience or they see something they don't like, there will possibly be consequences that impact your brand and do some damage online. So with all these considerations, sustainability, staying ahead of the competition, one step ahead, how do you see the future of marketing?
It's interesting. I think it is going to be this, and I used the phrase earlier, this perfect storm. And I think we're getting to that now. I think the future of marketing really as a discipline, for me, I think is going to be that any marketer or anybody who wants to become a marketer or anybody who's a marketer already who wants to forge a future career is just going to have to wake up. And I include myself in this really as well. So I'm not kind of preaching something I'm not going to be doing myself. And what I mean by that is to just realize that the old marketing models are old marketing models. They're very obsolete now because we're going into a whole new space. We're not just even talking about the physical human reality here. When we introduce things like metaverse, a lot of people call that virtual reality. I'm calling it new reality because I think with personalization, with AI, with metaverse, we're looking at a new reality emerging where we'll see this beautiful blend of opportunities to trade globally, even off planet. Who knows where that's going to go in the next 10 to 15 years, quite possibly, if Elon's got anything to do with it. But I think certainly it's going to be this new reality and a new definition of how we do business. And I don't think marketers are going to be trading, give it, say, 10 years. I don't think marketers are going to be trading in products and services in the way that we've known it. I think there will be a lot of what we might call circular business, circular economy, where we get into a relationship with a customer and we serve them with value for the long term. So some of it might be product, some of it might be service, some of it might be information, some of it might be education, might be entertainment, or it might be a blend of all of those things. Personalized, of course, in a reality that suits them. So it could be virtual, could be new reality, a blended thing. It might even still be face to face. Who knows? But of course, it is this whole thing of all of these things coming together. I produced a little piece last year, actually, on a sort of a visual that I was calling The History and Future of Marketing, using Kondratiev, who's an ancient economist who identified these ever decreasing cycles of time in which we've all gone through in these economic cycles. The one that comes after the one that we're just talking about here, I'm predicting is going to be well-being. And that is actually going to be that brands are going to need to kind of see how they're contributing to their customers' well-being. Because the well-being thing, as we move beyond AI and the hype around robotics and automation and sustainability, it will be, okay, that's great, but where does that take us? Well, it takes us to a whole new way of being a human, a whole new way of actually interacting. And so for me, my prediction would be at that point, it's going to be about well-being. How can we inspire well-being, and in all its senses, physical, emotional, spiritual, in, the customers that we have. And so I think there's this incredible opportunity coming. And so for me, the future of marketing is all about, again, staying that one step ahead in terms of attention. We might not have all the answers, but we have to wake up and be very aware that if we're still just doing social media, we're not a marketer.
Wellbeing is very interesting that you brought that up, because this came up in a conversation, and I said to the person I was having a conversation with about how unhappiness and almost sedation was the real pandemic. And so when that's the case and people are less present, that there's more and more mental health issues, all these things taking place, then well-being does become prized in all those different areas that you spoke about. So I think that's fascinating for the people listening to start considering that if they just look around when they're in a busy place and just sort of connect the dots a little bit. So that's fascinating that you touched on that. Seems to be something that's been planted. So that's really cool. Thanks for sharing that. Are there any tools that you're embracing or you started using now that are in that one step ahead category that can help people that are marketers or they're business owners and they're doing some marketing to accelerate, to get an edge, or to make their marketing better?
It's not going to be rocket science either. I think it is a very, very simple suite of things that I use personally. And these are just news feeds. These are things like getting a small number, because you can get way too many of these and go down lots of little rabbit holes that you just get lost in. But certainly getting a good suite of podcasts. I would say probably 5 or 6 favorite podcast channels that you listen to. And you don't have to listen to them every day, but maybe once a fortnight, something like that, maybe once a week. Just go and get some briefings. I also used to be called Twitter, it's now called X. I use lists on X for kind of monitoring and watching various different sectors and the thought leaders in those sectors. And again, it's not something I do every day, but I just make sure I diary in just to spend 10, 15 minutes just looking through some of the latest kind of emerging opportunities and the things that are being talked about. So those things can be kind of really, really useful. And, just as an example on the whole AI thing, which I know a lot of marketers are now kind of, obviously focusing in on and trying to work beyond ChatGPT, though we love ChatGPT, version 4, version 5 coming soon, I hear, but no release date yet announced. But apparently on the briefings I'm hearing, it's coming soon. Websites and new services like Imaginative, which I found quite recently, which is a very, very good one that kind of gives AI news and updates and thought leadership. And again, you can stream much as Mashable back in the day was a very popular one for marketers. It's kind of reinvented itself a little bit in recent years. But yeah, it's just about surrounding yourself, I think, with just reliable, steady sources, both of inspiration and, just latest thinking. And I think if you can almost create on your desktop a little dashboard of those feeds, that's all you need just to stay that one step ahead. So it isn't rocket science. It is quite straightforward.
Brilliant advice. And I did want to step into the podcasting conversation a little bit, because for the listeners, for context, Neil has a podcast that I think it's in the top 10 in the entrepreneur category in best podcasts. So do you want to talk a little bit about when you started podcasting, how you approach it and what that journey's been like for you?
It's just such a great journey, and it just means I get to talk to great people like you, Aaron. I mean, this is just so good. Again, because this isn't our first conversation, which is lovely. So for me, it started actually back when we were all locked down. So I decided back then I'd probably recorded 15 to 20 episodes of the podcast, and it was quite random. I was just exploring the technology. I was seeing if I could get anybody to listen to it. I mean, there were some interesting little guests. I mean, it was friends of friends kind of around that time. But as we were in lockdown, I decided, well, okay, there's not a lot else to do really, apart from go for your obligatory one walk a day kind of around the block. So I thought, what could I do? I know what I could do. This is going to last for quite some time. So let's see if I could do 50 podcast episodes in 50 days. And that's what I set out to do. So every working day for 10 weeks, I did a podcast, and that was recording, editing, and publishing. And I got into this almost conveyor belt of, media house, it felt like at the time, but it was incredible. It made you feel connected. It was enabling me to meet lots of really interesting people. I'd meet somebody, talk to somebody, and then they'd introduce at the end of the conversation somebody else who I might be interested to talk to. So I was getting friends of friends inviting themselves on, and there was a waiting list by the end of it, which was really fun. So I've obviously scaled back since then because I've got clients and others to serve, but I use various kind of matchmaking agencies. Podmatch was obviously a very nice one where we actually first met, which was great. Yes. And I would certainly recommend those because with the various kind of filtering mechanisms, you can meet people who are totally relatable to the themes that you run with. And so I would always recommend to people, figure out what your key messages and themes are that you want to cover. You can start with a random kind of subject matter, but I think as quickly as you can, get a topic or topics that you love and that would resonate potentially with an audience. I would suggest go chasing the cash. I think the dollars will come potentially through endorsements, maybe product placement and the like. You can also, through various channels, you can actually leverage the podcast itself because you can provide for subscription versus the free versions of certain podcasts. So if you want to do like an added value, kind of deeper dive conversation or piece of thought leadership, you can put that behind a paywall so you can make money from it. But for me, that's not how I'm playing it. I'm playing it because I love the topics that I do. I love talking to the people I meet. And it's just becoming a real, I guess, social exercise for me as well, because it enables me to meet people and engage with people from all around the world. So as a feed into my knowledge and my learning as well, because we're all learning. I don't know everything. It's a great refresher for me every day that I record an episode. So it doesn't have to be high tech. You don't have to have lots of equipment. We're both recording from home studios here. You can, yes, go big budget, but you don't have to. And the publishing and distribution is potentially for free. Podcasters.spotify.com is the one I use. Formerly was Anchor, if anybody can remember back at the days of Anchor. And so, it's very low budget, but it enables you to reach a global audience. And I think anybody who wishes to get some thought leadership topics out there, it's just an untapped channel, really. And I don't think enough marketers are making best use of it yet.
I'm curious, someone that's been podcasting for an extended period of time, as we know, most people drop off and leave the game before episode 20, I think is the stats for 90% of people. What has it done for you in a professional sense? One, let's also cover content creation, given it's a content marketing podcast. How's that helped your ability to create content? And also, how's it served your business and your professional growth?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think probably there's two answers here. One is at a practical level, and the other one is a bit more strategic in terms of the support of my business. So the practical level one is that I know I've got now so many sound bites and really useful tips and clips and shorts and reels that when anybody asks me for any guidance or advice, I can point them towards. So I have this huge reference or this huge vault of reference content that I can say, I've got a great one there. I interviewed Aaron and he was talking about this. And so here's the clip, there's the link to it. So I've got this when anybody asks me anything. And because I do a lot of teaching, it's just great having that reference source. But it's also good for clients when they ask, can you back that up with something? I can say, I've got 6 links here that all are saying the same thing. So you've got to believe these guys because they're the professionals. So again, from a practical sense, it's just really good having that content. From a more more strategic angle, I think for me, I'm just very clear where it sits in my customer's journey. It tends to sit either side of the conversion point. So it's not something that's developing me new business. So it's not at the open end of the sales funnel here, but I've positioned it kind of at the trust level, just pre-conversion. So if I meet a new client or a new prospect, and I'm kind of taking them through that initial sort of integration into the business, and I'm there trying to get them to sign the contract, the fact I have a podcast that's got 430 episodes there positions me as, oh, right, you're connected. Oh, you're a bit different to the other guys that we've spoken to because all they do is X, Y, and Z. So I'm kind of already those few steps ahead just because I've got that longevity in the game. So it's been great for that. But it's also very, very useful post-conversion point as well, because some of the clients that I have actually appeared on the podcast as well. So I can actually offer that up as a nice new way of increasing their bandwidth and their reach as well. And because a lot of my clients are actually marketers within organizations, what's not to like with that? Because they can then start to create their own thought leadership as part of engaging with me. So it's kind of a win-win-win, sort of all parties are benefiting. But I think, to be very, very clear where it would sit in your journey. So it might be for some people listening to this that they want it in the kind of retention phase of the customer journey, which is post-purchase, where you're keeping people sweet. So this is a nice thing that could go into newsletters, or it could just be something you drip feed to your customers when you know it's a topic that they would find interesting. So I think just be very clear of the topics that you're going to cover, keep those very consistent, and then decide where it sits in the journey for your customers and your audience.
That's sound advice, especially from someone that's approaching 500 episodes. Very few people get to that. So anyone that's listening and would like to go down the podcasting route, which we have spoken about as a content strategy, I think Neil is a really powerful person to follow because he's got the runs on the board and also learn about marketing as you go. Do you have a final marketing tip or thought that you want to leave the listeners with?
Yeah, be curious and be like a sponge, really. I think if you think you know it and you're in marketing, if you think you know how to do marketing and you're sat there almost a little complacent, almost a little and particularly I'm talking here to the senior marketers as well. So if you're CMO, if you're a marketing director or marketing manager, come on guys, you've got to upskill. You've got to really wake up because you're doing marketing that was yesterday. So therefore, I'm being quite challenging here by saying that, but I see so many cases where that's the case. It isn't going to be everybody. Some people are doing some amazing stuff out there. And of course, I'm here to kind of showcase those guys too. But if you're sat there thinking that yesterday's marketing is still relevant, you've got to wake up.
Love that. And how can the listeners follow you or get in touch?
I tend to be now, as you say, thanks very much for the plug for the podcast. I tend to be now quite easy to find just because I've been in the game so long. So if they're interested in the podcast, that you can just search out the Neil Wilkins podcast. Yeah, it's not a rocket science kind of name, nothing clever there. So the Neil Wilkins podcast. But if you just search Neil Wilkins marketing in Google, other search engines are available, including ChatGPT. Yeah, you should find me.
Amazing. And I highly recommend jumping on and following and listening to Neil's podcast, especially if you listen to this podcast, because it'll be very complimentary and add more strings to your bow in terms of your development. I've really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you so much for coming on and giving so much value.
Thank you for the opportunity, Aaron. Really appreciate it.
If you've enjoyed this episode and you're not following or subscribing, hit that button so you can catch all new future episodes on demand.